Hey, friends. Welcome to another episode of Priorities on Purpose. Listen, today I have Tori Shirah, who is a previous coaching client of mine. You are going to love her. We've been talking already and kind of catching up and talking about life. And today I told her when we were talking about this, where should we go? Because there's lots of different directions we could go, but I thought she would be the perfect person to talk with you about the journey and adventure of saying yes to God. When God asks you to do things that may be uncomfortable or scary, or, you're just like, I don't know, or you feel overwhelmed with it. And so, Tori, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I so appreciate it.
Yes. So Tori, we've already recorded with Tracy, which is another previous coaching client of mine. The two of them together make up the podcast,
The Unlikely Housewives.
which perfect name. I love it. And you guys have had so much success. And I've just loved being on this journey with you guys and just cheering you on. You have great guests and you're doing amazing things with just talking about the things that nobody wants to talk about. And I love that.
Well, thank you very much. It's all your fault. I say that with the most love because Tracy and I started the podcast for, gosh, um 2021, so yeah, almost 4 years ago. And we started it because we both were doing coaching with you, and we had gotten to a point where we were in some other arenas of life as well, and we just felt God put it on our hearts to start a podcast. And we didn't see it by ourselves, but because we had both been chatting with you and being coached, we started, we were like, hey, so I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Oh, yeah, me too. Really? What about? I don't know. Like, Melissa's been talking me through it. And then it grew out of that. And here we are 4 seasons later and 107 episodes in. It's insane. So.
Yes, it is. Again, like one of those yes things. And so this season on the podcast, we are talking a lot about like when we feel stuck and what gets us there and what gets us out of it. And I feel like one way that we become stuck is when God asks us to do something and we aren't willing. And the thing that gets us out of being stuck is saying yes and just doing the
Mhm.
thing. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we don't do it. And I don't know that I've shared this, but I think I don't think I've shared this on the podcast. I don't know that I've even shared it with you, but I have to share this with you. You and Tracy both came to me as referrals.
Mhm.
And obviously, Tracy and y'all knew each other beforehand. And I started working with Tracy. Tracy told you about me, I think, in the sauna. And then you were like, okay, I need a consult with her also. And so then we started working together. The thing that is interesting to me that just came back to my mind is where I was. Like, I had recently been making all kinds of decisions that felt scary. And okay, where were we before I was? Listen, y'all, real talk. I just got an alert saying there was low storage, and I realized it's because I had 15,000 browsers open. So I paused it to delete all the browsers, the windows, because there really was. I can't even. I think it took like 3 minutes to go in and exit all those out.
But that's real life. Like we talk about that our like I love the meme that says like my brain is like a browser that has 1,000 tabs open and I can't find which one the music is coming from. That's annoying. And you're like, yes, like
I, that is a
yeah,
problem.
it is a problem. It is.
I love it. Okay, so anyways, what I was saying before I was interrupted and reminded to close all the tabs was that you guys came to me as referrals. I had recently quit. I had stepped down, resigned from direct sales because I knew God had asked me to. Again, not easy to do, making that decision when, it was very comfortable. I was good at it. Everything looked good. I was doing all the things. I had a ton of parties. And we can, I can go into a whole nother episode on just like when quitting is what you should do and when it's what you shouldn't do, because there is a
Mm-hmm.
time and a season for different things. And there was times when I wanted to quit and God said, nope. And there were times when, he's like, it's time,
Yes.
and so anyways, I had resigned and I was feeling like, okay, like I need more coaching clients. And at the same time, it didn't make sense in my head. Was I'm thinking with my brain instead of, God. And he told me to take a break from social media. And I was like, this does not make sense, because all the gurus tell you don't take a break from social media when you need clients. And at the time, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have this podcast. So that literally was in my brain. The only way I was going to get clients was showing up and talking about what I do and doing it my way, right?
Yep.
Which is
Mm-hmm.
part of the problem. Anyway, so I was obedient and was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I took a break from social media. And at that time, I'm not even kidding you, that is when a coaching client referred Tracy to me. And then shortly after that, Tracy referred you to me. And so all this time, like I felt like I needed to do it the world's way. And God's like, no, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to do it the world's way. You're going to do it my way. And because I was obedient, first of all, it was so much more peaceful. It was so much more sustainable. And
Mm-hmm.
it was so good because it showed the faithfulness of God and that he is in control. Like all I have to do is take the very next step he's given me, not what the world says, not what my business coach was saying or anything like that, but just like this one little thing. And so, anyways, I don't know that you knew that. Had I
I
ever shared that?
didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So you were an answer to prayer, even though at the time, like, honestly, I don't even know I was praying. I don't know that I was even praying for it. I knew I needed clients, but I just didn't understand how it was going to work because, my mind was very small, and not thinking like the way God works, which is hilarious because I could
Right.
tell you all the things. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
God did this, God did that. But in the moment, a lot of times we're head down just doing the work and we forget how big our God really is. And so today I love that I have you here and, like this kind of a full circle moment again of
Mm-hmm.
like the obedience of just saying yes to God and how God shows up. And so I know a little bit of your story from following you. On your journey, whether it was through social media or through the podcast, because here's the beauty of it. I think some people think when you get a life coach you keep the life coach, and sometimes maybe, but my job really is to coach you to the point that you don't need me anymore. And
Right.
so I love that you've been doing this work without me, because really it comes from God.
Right.
But
It
sometimes
does.
we do need we need that little push and like someone to be there to hold our hand through some things, which is what I do. Um,
AKA hit us in the head with a 2x4 also. Sometimes
yes.
it's not holding our hand. Sometimes it's just like, would you just do this already? Like quit,
Yeah.
just listen to me.
That's
Yes.
hilarious. Yeah. Which, I pray for bricks. I pray for God to hit me with a brick. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because then I know that I
Right.
know that I know that I know. And I can't
Yep.
not know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So tell us what comes to mind in your life over the last few years of you saying yes to God, leaning into the adventure, even when you were afraid, you didn't understand, or maybe you were overwhelmed.
Well, the first thing when I say it really has only been the last couple of years of saying yes. Um, the podcast, it's not until now really that I realized that the podcast was the first yes that I said yes to, and didn't intentionally know it. Which which is incredible, because through the podcast, God has given, um, me such a platform, but also, like, such an adventure with meeting people and, a reason to meet people, and just it's whether, Tracy and I joke that, we've got 4 listeners, and whether it's for them or it's selfishly the guest is for us, so we could just have a conversation with somebody like, "Hey, if that's how God uses it, that's how God uses it." Um, but I would say the when I realized, I think the podcast was like when you're on a roller coaster. I think the podcast was just getting into the roller coaster cart, right? And it was like, all right, I'm in line. You're scared at first, but you're like, okay, but I'm strapped in. It's totally okay. I'm on a track. This is fine. And you don't realize what you're actually doing yet. I think that, for me, the ascend on, that first big hill for me was in the summer of 22, no, 23, sorry, 23, where God put it on my heart to reach out to a nonprofit that, I had been following. There's a gentleman named Seth Gruber who is a pro life activist. What makes his pro life organization, the White Rose Resistance, different than any other pro life organizations is that they focus on educating and activism. So they want to educate people in the way that they can have conversations with the people in their circles to explain why we're pro-life, the history of pro-life, the bigger picture of how pro-life affects all the things and how God, like how God sees abortion and all of that. And so I had followed him on social media, and that summer I just felt like God was saying, I want you to do something for the White Rose. Because they had just were getting started. And so I was like, okay, like what? And God's like, just write an email. Just write an email. I was like, okay, I can write an email. Um, so I told Andrew, I was like, hey, here's the
Which is your
thing.
husband.
Yes, Andrew's my husband. I said, I feel like God's putting it on my heart to do something for the White Rose. I have no idea what it looks like. I have no idea but I'm sending an email. I'm sending an email just to see what happens. Like maybe it's a dinner party where we have a couple of couples over and we watch one of Seth's like his presentations or his sermons or whatever. And then maybe, I don't know. And he's like, okay. God bless my husband for being able to say like, okay to me in a complete, so many times he says it and not knowing what that okay means.
Yeah.
Like, which is great because I think God blinds him a lot. Because if he had any idea what he was getting himself into, Andrew would be like, whoa, hold on. So that is a gift from God. But so I did. I wrote an email. Now, Seth at the time was like out of Southern California. He was working with Godspeak Church, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills with Jack Hibbs, two of my favorite pastors, Rep McCoy too. And so I sent an email just saying, hey, I want to do something to raise some money for the White Rose. And then I'd also, by the way, I have a podcast and I would love to have Seth on as a guest to bring awareness. And so thought nothing of it. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from a gentleman, and he says, hey, I'm with the White Rose. We got your email. Did you have something in mind of doing this fundraiser? And I said, honestly, no idea. Not a clue. I just knew that God asked me to send an email and just find out. And he's like, okay. He goes, do you know where Seth lives? And I said, well, he lives in Southern California, right? Like that's where where he's based out of. And the gentleman told me, he goes, no, he moved to Ottawa, Kansas, which is 45 minutes south of me, about 7 months ago. And I just said, no effing way. Like, pardon the French, but I really was like, you're kidding me. Who in their right mind moves from beautiful Southern California to, I love Kansas. I'm from Texas, but I love Kansas and call Kansas home. But to Ottawa, what is a nothing town, like legit nothing town, for like it takes them an hour and a half to get to the airport. Okay. What? Seriously, why would you do? And come to find out, Seth's in-laws are from Ottawa. The wife's from Ottawa, and with all of his traveling, she wanted to be closer to family. And so I was like, "You're kidding me! No, this is." So he's like, "So really, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Okay, let's do an event." And so that started this whole thing of of or process of basically I threw an event for the White Rose with over 100 guests in 60 days. The event ended up raising, I believe, $70,000 for the White Rose, which was incredible. And it just like in the midst of all of that, like Seth came to my house to record a podcast with me and Tracy. Like so many doors were opened, and I just saw God's faithfulness. And um, like and the things that I remember doing for this event, because I was like, this isn't mine. This was not my idea. This was just God. Like this was only God's. And so like the things I would do for it were so, I mean, I'm an extrovert most of the time. Um, I'm not shy. Um, People, think I have this personality of like, oh, that's Tori, she's out there. And which from afar you could absolutely see that. But it has become exponential because I now live in the reality, and I say reality because it is real, that I get to say yes and God's got it. My job, my job is only obedience, not the outcome.
Yes.
And that's it. And so when you live in that reality and space, the things you do are ridiculous and look foolish to everyone else. Um, so as I have a wide network. I'm a people collector by nature. That's just who I am. So I had quite a few avenues to reach out to people, but I would also like have these invitations to this event with me all the time. And so, I mean, like one instance in particular, I'll tell you two real quick. The first one, I drive a Jeep. So it was summer. My doors were off. I pull up to a stoplight. The car in front of me has a pro-life license plate on it. And it had just turned like it was I think it just turned actually red. It turned red. And then I felt God tug on my heart and say, I want you to go give that person an invitation. And I was like, I'm at a freaking stoplight. No, like, God, like, no, this is 4 lanes going both ways. So, like, an 8-lane huge road. And I'm like, no, there's no way. I'm like, all right, God, if you make the light change, where it's red again, then I'll do it. It turned green. 3 seconds later, it turned red. No cars got to go through. And I was like, damn it. So I jump out of my car with an invitation, which is again much easier since my car doesn't have doors at the time. And I knock on this woman's car window, which scares the bejesus out of her. She's like, oh my God. And I'm like, sorry. Saw you had a pro-life license plates. Here's an invitation. Just wanted to invite you to it. And she was like, oh, okay. And I was like, just felt God led me to give this to you. And she was like, okay. And that was it. Like, have no idea. The woman didn't show up. I mean, I would have recognized her at the event, but for some reason, God used that. He just did. And the other example I'll give is I was meeting somebody for coffee, um, to like, just because I run a print shop now, in the process of all of this house, that's fun too. That was not something I saw, but I was meeting somebody for a networking for the print shop, and I was leaving for coffee. Again, Jeep, no doors, no roof, and it's starting to rain. And when you have a Jeep that has no roof, you're like, I got to get in my car and go get home or get to cover because my car is going to be soaked. And I'm walking out of this coffee shop. I'm parked a little bit further away, but as I'm walking out, I pass these two women who are talking, and one of them has a cross necklace. And God said, I can hear him go, I want you to go say hi to them and introduce yourself. And I was like, huh, no, like, really, like, my car is getting soaked right now. Like, I'm gonna have to drive home and be soaking wet in something. Like, I don't have time for this. And I said no. I said no. And so I kept walking. I get halfway through the parking lot, and God very clearly just goes, no, you're gonna do this one. And I was like, all right, fine. So soaking wet now. I'm still soaking wet. I walk back in, and I walk up to their table and I go, hi, this sounds crazy. I know. I look crazy. I know. But my name's Tori Shirah. Here's my card. I just felt led to come introduce myself to you and just say hi. My business card. God asked me to do crazy things and I do them. And here you are. And they were like, oh, okay. Well, hi. And so and then I was like, all right, well, thanks. Nice to meet you. I got their name. A day later, and I again leave, get in my car, and I'm like, really, why did I do that, God? I have no idea. And a day later, God connects me, or one of the lady reaches out on LinkedIn, and she's a CEO of like this huge company here in Kansas. And she just said, hey, I just wanted to say thank you so much for just following what God asked you to do and saying hi. She goes, it was so refreshing. I can't wait to see what God has in store for you. And it was just like this God wink of like, no, when you do, like, whether it means anything to me, it doesn't. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, it can't mean anything to me. I just have to do it, and not worry about what the outcome is. Because if I'm always waiting on this, what is success, I'm never going to see it. Because here in the world, we define success as, X amount of followers, X amount of money in the bank account, a degree, husband and X amount of children, a that we live in X zip code, and then we go to the best schools. Like, people define worldly success in those parameters. And yes, I am beyond blessed. Um, I mean, uh, with the life circumstances that God has put me in. Um, but for me, I've come to realize that success is when you're obedient, and it's not, you know, there's not a monetary value to that. There's a lot of times w- success is sacrificing the time, um, your will. You sacrifice your will for His, which is golly hard. And you sacrifice things that you didn't even know that you loved, that you want, like things that you didn't even know that you wanted to safeguard. Um, and so, yeah, so from 2021 to whatever 2023 on, it has been like this perpetual roller coaster. And I am in dips, like there are low times, and then there's like these climbing up the hills, like, oh, I have no idea what he's going to do with this. Um, and then, but like I tell people, I'm like, if you want the adventure of a lifetime, it's give up your will for his.
Yeah.
That's it.
Can we talk tangibly for a minute about something that you said? First of all, you said success is about being obedient. And
Hmm.
what I think when I think about that, like the thing that I would add is because then you're in alignment with his will, right?
Yes.
And the other thing you said something about like things that you're safeguarding, like you
Hmm.
recognize things you're safeguarding, like you're holding on to a little tightly in your own ways versus his ways. Can you give us a few examples of like how God showed you that, maybe through this process of, saying yes to the fundraiser, or just moments that have come after that?
Of just of things that I've had to that end up sacrificing
Yeah.
because this. Okay. Um, I I love to travel. I love to travel. I can enjoy traveling by myself. I love to enjoy, like I love meeting new people. I love going to things. This is just it's just something that I enjoy. Um, and one of the things that God has he's gifted me with that ability to do that, where I've gotten to meet some incredible individuals in traveling. Um, One of them, we could go on all day long about how God just like God just put me on a plane next to a former Secret Service agent. I mean, that worked on the presidential detail. It was amazing. It was awesome. Got to meet him. Then he introduced me to his friend that writes a book named Cheating Death. Highly recommend, by Kenneth Valentine. I'll make sure Melissa gets the link. And
I
I read that
listened to that
book.
podcast episode, by the way. It was so good. I'm like, that book is on my list
Yes, it
because,
is. And
yeah.
he just came out with a devotional, so it's really, really good. But anyways, so Kenneth Valentine wrote this book, but one of the things that he wrote in this book was talking about how um he got to a point where somebody was saying that, like his job wasn't family friendly because he was gone so much of the time. Because when you are on the presidential detail, you're gone a lot, and he has kids. And so a well meaning family friend gave him, like a story article about talking about how this other guy, this other Secret Service, gave up his job because it wasn't family friendly. And he really struggled with that. He was like, wait, are so my job isn't family friendly. Like, so what does that mean? Um, and it definitely, sorry.
That was the ADHD timer.
Yep. Um, but it gave me this perspective of what is family friendly. And because God doesn't necessarily call us to a life that is family friendly. And so, while a lot of times when I travel, I get this mom guilt of not being here for kids, certain things, whether it's a volleyball tournament here or a basketball game there, or something, just something as doing, my daughter's hair every morning before school, which is she loves. And when I travel, I have a lot of that guilt because I feel like I am a mom. I like my role is to be there for the kids. But then um, the grace of God introducing me to that author and reading his book but like not everything is family friendly. And, very rarely in the Bible, if ever, are any of the tasks that God asks people to do family friendly. Sure, they include people's families, but it's like, Daniel walking into the lion's den, not really family friendly. Like, I mean, granted, it wasn't Daniel's choice, but that's not something that you would openly choose for yourself.
Right.
And when you look at saying, okay, well, and for coming from a direct sales background, where, you know, a lot of times they say faith, then family, then career. And we want, there's no such thing as a work-life balance. There's not, but there's a God life balance for sure. And if all of us, think about this, if all of us were to go to the extreme and do jobs that were only family friendly, that means we're home on evenings and weekends. There would be no ER doctors. There would be no first responders. There would be, you know, no, I mean, traveling, anything. I mean, there's no way that the world could function if Christians were all at home evenings and weekends because we all had jobs that were family friendly.
Do you think though that our view of family friendly is corrupt? Because we're thinking with a worldly lens of what family friendly looks like versus
100%.
yeah.
100%. I think we confuse quantity with quality. That if I'm home on the evenings and weekends, I think that we think, well, then, or if I'm at my kid's soccer game, then that's a great thing. Well, let's be honest. If I'm at my kid's soccer game, and I use soccer because to me soccer is boring, I'd be scrolling my phone. I'm not watching my kid play soccer. I'm scrolling my phone because so am I really there? No, probably not. Mentally, emotionally, not there. But am I present and emotionally there when I'm brushing my daughter's hair and putting her hair up in a ponytail and I'm quietly praying over her? Yes, I am. When I'm home, I pray, I go, we tuck everybody in and we do a quick prayer. We snuggle a little bit, but that's like the quality time. And that's something that, while I do feel tremendously, there is that guilt, like, okay, God, am I doing this right? Because am I supposed to be gone away from my family? Like, I it's hard to tell, right? But for the moments that I am there with my family, I'm there. I'm there more than I ever was there.
I will say the one thing that God has been teaching me a lot in this season, and I swear I hear this message over and over and over, is be where your feet are. Just be where your feet are. Like
Yeah.
today, this is what's on the list, and he has been teaching me. I have really been challenged to, because work is fun for me.
Hmm.
And last year was the year that he made it very clear to me that family was the priority
Hmm.
and business was not going to grow. Like coaching was not going to grow. It was about family. And that was where I was to invest my time. And for me, I love to work. And that's where, again, I get that instant gratification from my work a little bit
Hmm.
more than, trying to pour into my kids, reading the Bible with them. One, it's a lot easier than the other. One of them is like 2 minutes and we're done for
Hmm.
him, but like it's just harder, like he doesn't want to hear from me. He doesn't want to glean the wisdom of what I can share with him. And so in that though, I had to, stop overworking, but also recognize when I'm working, and when I'm not at work, I'm not at work,
Right.
and being where my feet are. And so he just constantly like, I leave town um Thursday to go for a TV interview, which is very exciting, by the way.
Very exciting.
And in that, like, I know it's God.
Hmm.
I wouldn't even have this if it wasn't for God. But I could very much have the mom guilt because I'm missing a track meet.
Yep.
But the truth is he's going to be okay, and he also needs, like, I've let him in on this journey. He knows what I do, why I do it, and I am trying to be very present in the moments when he's here, to not be in here working, which would be the case a lot of the times. I'm still not perfect, especially when things are disrupted and routines change. Like
Right.
it would be, I always say, like, it would be great if we lived in a bubble and things go as planned, like for our goals and our tasks and our to-do list. But the truth is, if we lived in that bubble, we wouldn't have the things that cause those disruptions, which means we wouldn't have the husband, we wouldn't have the kids, we wouldn't, like, none of that. Like, we would just be in a bubble by ourselves, and that's not what God created us for. And so
Right.
while things aren't perfect and things are disrupted, it's actually beautiful. But
Hmm.
also helps us recognize that, like, we have limited, like, we are limited. One of the books I read last year that I loved was by Jen Wilkin, and I can't remember even off the top of my head the name of it. But if anyone wants it, I'll put it in the show notes. But in it, she talks about, like, the qualities of God and, like, the limited capacity we have because we are not God. And as someone who has struggled with the savior complex and tries to be all the things to all the people, we have to recognize, like, we can only do what we can do, and that has to be enough. And we have to trust God with what we can't do. Right.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that mom guilt is so real for so many of us when we're trying to do, whether it's just going to work, and missing our kids' first steps. Some of us can't work from home, and so when they're out doing their thing and, can't nurse their kid when they're sick, like, there's beauty in that for our children and us as well. And we can give those sorrows, we can give those worries, we can give those fears, we can give that guilt, all of that to God, and trust him with it. And it also, I think, can help our kids to realize the world does not revolve around them. Like, there's
Yes,
a gift in that.
there is. There is. I mean, and like, I'm very, like, for me, politics has become a passion, and so it's something that definitely I can feel my feet being led into. But I bring my kids in that space with me. So, like, my kids, I remember distinctly on election night, there we've got, a mainstream media up on the TV. We've got a streaming service on one of the laptops. And then one daughter's counting the electoral votes, by hand to make sure, like, okay, well, they've called this state here, but they haven't called this state there. Da 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 da. And but it's important for me for them to know, like, the passion that I have for it and where God's leading me is, like, this is why I love it. I want you to be part of it. Like, that's how I'm bringing you in on it.
Yeah.
But, like, it took me away from them for an entire week last month, because I went to the inauguration and part of the pro-life stuff. And I'll be honest, as a person that loves to travel and an only child, also, I am fine by myself. On the second day, I called my family and said I'm homesick and I wanted to come home. Like, I I didn't know anybody out there for that first part of the week for the inauguration. I was crying to my kids, like, just saying, like, I miss you. I would want to be experiencing this with you. I'd want you out here. I wanted nothing more than Andrew to be out there, my husband. I mean, he's my best friend. But for some reason, God had me experience it all alone. It turned out to be great. I ended up having a fantastic time. God, used it in so many ways. That could be a podcast on its own. Actually, it is. Go check out the Unlikely Housewives, Tori's recap of Washington, D.C. So go check out that episode. But I mean, it was just, but it was different. It was a different kind of thing. But it reminded me too of, like, the the family, like, but they know, and they know why I'm doing it, and they know that, like, I have faith in God, and they watch me jump into things, or they watch me jump out of the car and knock on the window of another a complete stranger, say, "Hey, God told me to give you this invitation. Here it is." I have embarrassed them greatly in many a store, talking to people and going, "So, how's your relationship with Jesus?" And they're just like, "Oh."
Well, it kind of reminds me though, when you talk about the kids, some a message that I shared a long time ago, about Peter when he got out of the boat. If you want to walk on water, you got to first get out of the boat. And then that didn't only impact Peter, it also impacted all of those people that were in the boat who were there and had the opportunity to see it, to
Yeah,
see Peter actually walking on water.
yeah,
Like, how cool is that? Because I think, if I remember correctly, like at the end of that like scripture, it says, and then those in the boat and Peter, like they worshiped God. And
hmm,
so like the little, I love scripture because sometimes we see the big story, but we forget that we miss like those little moments. And then all of those people that were in the boat worshiped. And it was just
yeah.
like, God is so good. All right, real quick. Oh, what do you
I
want
was
to say?
gonna say, I want to, if I can wrap up with a story, like an antidote, if you will. It's
Yeah.
one of my favorites. Is that okay? So there was a gentleman who was a trapeze artist, and he drew a trapeze against the a huge waterfall, and he actually was going back and forth, and he was doing fantastic, so much so that he grew huge crowds on both sides. And then he starts doing, like walking on his hands and doing it. And then he gets to a point where he's got a huge crowd and he's got a wheelbarrow on one side, and he says, "Do you think that I could take this wheelbarrow across to the other side?" Now, a wheelbarrow is one wheel, okay? And wheeling it on a string, essentially, right? Across this huge waterfall. Now, all of these people have seen him do these wonderful things, but like a wheelbarrow, okay? And they're like, "Yes, you could do it. You can absolutely do it." And he's
I
like, "Are
already
you
know this story. I
I
literally am reading a book right now, and this story is in it.
Mhm.
This is
I
so
love
cool. Keep
this.
going.
And so he says, "You sir, do you believe that I can do this?" And the guy's like, "Yes, absolutely." And he says, "Great. Get in the wheelbarrow." And the guy stops. And that's what I look at life. Um I I look at it now as God saying, "Great, you say that you believe me, and you say that you've seen me do all these miraculous things, but now I'm asking you to get in the wheelbarrow and actually trusted me to do this." And I I I I've never been the same. And it is the adventure of a lifetime. And for your listeners, I highly encourage um encourage them to seek out that kind of relationship with Christ, to where you can step in all faith and go, "Okay, if this goes terribly wrong on the other side, like of whatever it is, I know that I'm still in the wheelbarrow with God and he's pushing me across the other side." But then also, if you're not there, I highly recommend finding I would say a life coach like you, a mentor, but somebody who has that kind of faith that can show you what it's like to have that faith. Because it's one thing to read about it, and scripture, we our brain will try to draw limits on it and put it in a box. And like, but Peter, did he, oh, he walked on water. I've heard that story 1,000 times. But when you see somebody doing it in real life, in reality, now it makes such a difference. You're like, "I don't understand how that," and they don't either. They have no idea, but they do know that it's God. And so I highly recommend, if anybody's on the fence about doing a coaching session with you, or even just a consultation, like, I highly recommend that they do it, because you have no idea what you're saying yes to when you say yes to God's obedience.
Yeah.
And it can be scary, and you feel that you're going to sacrifice things, but he's not going to just rip the rug right out from under you. I assure you, because your feet are going to be solid when you because you just know. Everybody around you might not know, but you know. And so that's all that matters. And so don't be scared that, like, well, but if I say yes, like, he's going to make me, move halfway across the country and not know anybody and da 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 da. Sure, he might. I mean, but he's going to get you to a point where you can do that and where you believe you trust in him enough to do it. So I encourage your listeners to, if they're not in that space, to get a coach like you. And help them talk through these processes, ask the hard questions, because then they can. And then again, then it's an adventure of a lifetime, and you'll never be the same.
You will
So,
never be the same. I think of so many different things that I was terrified of doing. And, God is so gentle and he is patient and he is loving and he is kind.
mhm,
I remember one time we had the opportunity to move to Texas. Hilarious.
mhm.
It was near Houston. And at the time, I couldn't even get
Oh,
on the interstate.
oh
And
my gosh,
I
that's
was
funny.
terrified of like driving in big cities and, all of that. And I remember thinking, there's no way this is God because he wouldn't take me from where I'm at today to here.
Mhm,
Like I just knew, and like it was too big of a step. And I knew that he like it did not line up for me because like I am willing to do hard things. I
mhm.
absolutely am willing to do hard things. But I have seen him like it's these little tiny micro steps almost
Yep,
of like one tiny little step of obedience after another. And before you know it, yeah, I literally have to get on the interstate now. Anywhere I go
yeah.
requires me to get on the interstate. Like
Well, and
now,
I will say on the flip side too, is that for me, one of my little steps of obedience was moving from my family where I was born and raised, moving with my husband to Kansas City and not knowing anyone.
yeah,
And
same.
and that was the tiny, like, there was so much that happened before that
Yeah,
that got me to the point where I could do that. But I will say that the step wasn't, while it looked like a huge step for others, because, like, I'll be honest, Andrew and I were not in a great space in our marriage. Like, it was not. I had multiple of my good friends who love me, who love the Lord, tell me, like, Tori, do not move with your marriage in this state, and to go to where you have no support system. Like, this is not a smart move. But the whole time God was like, get ready for Kansas City. Get ready for Kansas City. Get ready. And, like, so I was at a peace with it, and it felt like okay, like, I'm just going to do this. But for everybody else, it was like, you're nuts, you're crazy.
yeah.
And it's not, I mean, it's I cannot imagine what my life would be if I had, I mean, I would be boring. Mm. Who wants to be boring? I don't.
You would be in a rut. You would be stuck in autopilot
I would be
on the
yes.
hamster wheel doing the same
Yes.
thing every single day. It's funny you
Yes.
mentioned that about moving because I remember when I moved from Indiana, my hometown. I mean, my husband and I went to the pastor because I was refusing. Like he was like, "Yay, adventure!" Talking about an interview, all that like New York, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and all there were so many little steps. One, that I was even willing to meet with my pastor about it and in a place where I
Mhm.
would ask for help. Another, I'd never been on an airplane and I was terrified to fly. And when the opportunity for South Carolina came, they wanted to meet, like he wanted me to go there with him and see the place and the area and meet with his boss and everything. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do this, but I was willing to do it. And that we ended up making the move from Indiana to South Carolina. And I was like, I am never moving. Never say never, friends, because God
Usually,
will rip
yeah, that's
that
it.
right out of your hand. Well, not
Mhm.
rip, he'll gently pry, like, he'll he'll
Well,
he'll lovingly help you get there.
he will. He will. But
Yeah.
sometimes he does hit it out of your hand with a 2x4, which is
Yeah.
okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tori. I have loved this episode. Real quick, what would you say, like, when you started working with me, what was one thing that you, like, a challenge maybe that you struggled with when it came to saying yes? You obviously got there, but an obstacle maybe you had to overcome, like you were scared, or like maybe you didn't know, you were like, is this really going to work? This doesn't seem like it would work. Like, can you think of anything like that, and how you, like, how it ended up for you?
Well, obviously it ended up great because
Right.
yeah. I'm and I guess not everything is roses, but I mean, but look, I mean, this is the way that God has used my life is incredible. I think for me, the obstacle was like the thought of like, is this like, am I just is this just going to be something else that I pay for and never get anything out of, right? Um,
Because as an
but
Enneagram 7, you're quick to
mhm.
say yes.
I am. I'm quick to say yes. I sign up for all the free things, all the things.
Yeah.
I have so much content and so much extra that I'll never be able to. I'm like, oh, I'll just save it for later, and then I'll get. And
Yeah.
okay, yeah, no, I see one eighth of that maybe. Um, and it was like, no, like this is something like, but I really felt like God's go like, I, this is for you. This is for you. This is what I where you need to be. And I think in combination between that and having a friend like Tracy who was going through it too, and had been working with you for a couple of months already, and she was feeling so much better, so much lighter, and getting to a point that I was like, okay, yeah, like that God used her in that way for me too. And we're again, you would look at Tracy and I and say we have absolutely nothing in common in our life stages and what the things, but it turns out we have a lot in common. And he uses a lot of things to bring you closer together, and more importantly, closer to him. So
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving me a better update than, just listening. I'm always, always a cheerleader for you. I love
thank
seeing
you.
you do all the things, and, to be able to watch your stories on Instagram. I'm so thankful that I had, and like, cause I had it deleted, and then I added it back for a few, and I deleted it again today. So I'm glad that is over and I don't have to watch the stories from that. And I will listen to the podcast episode where you share all the good stuff. You guys definitely want to go check out the podcast. Unlikely Housewives, so, so good.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for all like you being obedient to God, because if you weren't obedient to God, Tracy and I would not be where we are today. So just want to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I think he probably would have just used somebody else.
He probably would have, but you got the blessing because you were obedient.
Yes, and
That's
I'm here for that, and it's just been a joy.
yes.